Welcome back to another episode of These Aren't the Nids You're Looking For. Lorenzo Fon sitting here with
Kevin Haupt over here. How you doing? We have a guest with us this week from the Science Sort of Podcast, the podcast about things that are science, things that are sort of science, and things that wish they were science. Ryan Haupt. How you doing, Ryan?
Hello there. Good.
Lorenzo?
How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
good.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day and coming on to talk Clone Wars with us. So,
absolutely, I'm looking forward to it. I've not watched Clone Wars before, and I'm happy to talk about why, and I'm looking forward to getting into the episodes I did watch.
Awesome. So, typically we just kind of jump into the episode, but to try to help you feel at home with your Science Sort of Podcast, one, do you want to say anything about what you do over there? And two, after that, I think we'll do a What Are You Drinking, if you prefer.
Yeah, that sounds great. So the Science Sort of Podcast, as you so appropriately said, is a show about things that are science, things that are sort of science, and things that wish they were science. I personally am a paleontologist. I study sloths and other fossil and living animals, mostly mammals, and in particular sloths. My podcast is covering basically any area of science. We purposely kept the show broad and a little bit vague so that we could talk about any area of science that was interesting to us, but also, like, if there's a cool Bigfoot story, we want to talk about that too, and that's where the sort of comes in. And we like to say that it's as if you got to listen in when a lab goes to a happy hour at the local bar, and we never want you to think that anyone involved in the conversation is standing at a lectern or wearing a lab coat.
Nice. Now you guys are pushing 300 episodes, right?
Coming up, yeah. I've mapped out the road to 300 recently, and it's going to be an intimidating haul, but we're going to get there, and I'm looking forward to crossing that threshold. It's going to be momentous because not many podcasts make it that long.
Yeah, for sure. Congratulations to you guys in advance. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
And I think you guys talked about Bigfoot way back in episode 1, if I'm correct.
We've talked about Bigfoot multiple times.
Or maybe the Loch Ness Monster.
We did talk about the Loch Ness Monster in episode 1. There was a story where a security guard, I guess, was just killing time on Google Earth and thought he had spotted the Loch Ness Monster. And even in episode 1, when we were not very good at podcasting yet, it was pretty clear to us that was a boat with a wake, and the boat looked like the body, and the wake kind of looked like fins, and it was that's all that was. So
that's awesome.
We don't mean to be killjoys. My pat line, and I say it with sincerity, even though it is pat, is that I would love for there to be a Loch Ness Monster. I just have a pretty high standard of evidence because I want it to. If it is real, I want to actually find it, and you don't find it by thinking that boats are Mesozoic reptiles. So
yeah. There's definitely a difference there, so you shouldn't sell yourself short. You guys got a great podcast, so keep it up. Keep up the
Thanks, man. Well, and I'm always excited to talk about Star Wars. We did actually do an entire segment on R2-D2 flight in an episode. So.
Okay, is that something that's already been released? Because I don't remember that one.
Yeah, the episode was called Rambling Catharsis because we end up just descending into. It became kind of just a therapy session for how we all felt about the prequels at that time. It's a little out of date. I have now that Star Wars Minute has completed the prequels, I have a different feeling because Star Wars Minute tends to give one a different perspective on each films as they are released. But at the time, it became a bit of a rant.
Well, that's all right, man. That's kind of what we do here. So, and we're definitely in prequel territory. So,
for sure,
for sure. I thought that we could do a What Are We Drinking episode, or segment, rather, something you guys do over on Science Sort of. Today I've got a Lagunitas Lucky 13. It's a Mondo Large Red Ale. Looks like alcohol is 8.8. This is maybe a little heavy. I'm looking for a bottle opener. So, Lorenzo, if you want to continue, I will figure out how to open this thing up.
Usually when Kevin and I are recording, Kevin always does have a drink, and I never usually do, but Kevin warned me that I should have a drink for this one, so I completely forgot to pick up something, but I already had some wine sitting around that I've had for a while, and it's actually in this freezer that's behind me.
I mean, they say it gets better with age.
Yeah, I don't know about this one, because this one's probably some cheap wine that I got as a gift a while back. Some Joseph Handler Sweet Red. So a nice dessert wine going. So we'll see how that goes. About to crack this guy open too. It's so fancy. It's a twist off cap. So
twist off caps are becoming a thing, man. A cork is less reliable than a twist cap or a synthetic cork. So
yeah, I'm sure it's going to be delicious if anything. So 9.5 alcohol. It's going to be fantastic, I'm sure. So I'm going to crack this guy open. So what about you over there?
Yeah, we started doing this segment on the show because my co-hosts were a little stiff on the microphone, and I knew that if they were stiff talking about science, they wouldn't be as stiff telling me what they were drinking, beer, whiskey, whatever, because that's something we nerd out about in a way that is more casual because our jobs aren't on the line. And then people liked it, so it just became a segment we did on the show. So I am having, from Wicked Weed Brewing, which is in Asheville, North Carolina, an astronomical India Pale Ale. It's a star, guys. It's a real
nice
Star War.
Nice.
Thought that would be appropriate. So
very nice.
A little foamy, but delicious.
What brewery was that again?
Wicked Weed Brewing in Asheville, North Carolina, which is kind of the mecca of East Coast brewing cities. Asheville, North Carolina has... Oh, yeah. I went there when I was doing my master's. We took a weekend trip, me and my lab group, and we literally parked the car at the hostel we were staying at and just walked the entire day and still managed to go to 7 or 8 breweries walking.
Damn.
Very nice.
Yeah, and all of them are fantastic, and so it's a great city for people who are looking for a good beer scene on the East Coast, and that's where like a lot of the big West Coast breweries are moving to when they set up their East Coast facilities, that region of North Carolina. So I think Sierra Nevada's out there now, and New Belgium's out there now.
Nice.
And, yeah, well, I guess New Belgium's not West Coast. It's Rocky Mountain, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Just if you want to set up an East Coast hub, that's where you go.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very nice. All right. We got 3 very different drinks going on, so yeah. I think this is my first time actually... No, I've had drinks during the show before, right?
This is your maybe second or third. Usually you're just on water.
Yeah.
So.
Not necessarily bad recording technique, but just not how we've evolved our show over the years. So appreciate you guys accommodating my particular proclivities as we record.
Oh, it's fun. It's cool.
Like Lorenzo
Kevin
said,
already does. Yeah.
I partake in the adult beverages while recording, so might as well.
He's already in. Yeah.
All right.
So
might as well let people know what we're having. So Lorenzo, you want to get into this thing?
Sure. Let's just kind of go over basics about this episode. We're talking about the Zillo Beast Strikes Back. This is season 2, episode 19. It aired in the U.S. on April 16th, 2010, and had a split date with the U.K. of April 10th, 2010. So it's been, 3 weeks of this split airing, right, Kevin?
Yes, that is
something
correct.
like that. The fortune cookie for this one is the most dangerous beast is the beast within. So a thing we usually do on this show, Ryan, is we just try and guess and attribute these fortune cookies that pop up at the beginning of every episode to a character that we think might have said quote, because otherwise the quote's kind of just there, It's just like this, I call it the fortune cookie. It's just kind of there. But Kevin started doing this thing where he was trying to guess who would say these quotes.
So when the Clone Wars first came out, I was younger than I am now. I was not a young man then, but for some reason my brain connected with these things at the beginning as always being from Yoda's mouth, and it wasn't until probably the more recent viewings that I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, these aren't all things that Yoda would say. So I decided that we would just kind of pick and choose who's giving us advice at the beginning of each episode. Lorenzo, did you put some thought to this, or did you do what you normally do and just wait until you read it on air?
Did what I usually did, which is not put any thought into this one at all. I don't know. This one's fairly generic. Like, This is a quote I could hear from a number of any of the Jedi that are floating around, or even Padme, right?
Yeah, I was thinking Yoda, Qui-Gon. I don't know.
Yeah.
Quinlan Voss, maybe.
This one's a pretty straightforward quote, and pretty like on the nose regarding the episode we're about to summarize and talk about here. So
works for me. So let's get into that. What's going on? We got our newsreel coming up, and obviously we caught a Zillo Beast last week, and I guess this episode we're gonna see how that Zillo Beast strikes back.
Yes, yeah. The newsreel essentially just covers the last episode. Doesn't really set up anything else. It's a previously on. So really, yeah, as you just said, we're coming back from Malastare with the Zillo Beast being brought to Coruscant because Palpatine wants to study it and check out its armor to try and figure out how to make stronger armor for the clone troopers. The Jedi are not cool with this idea because it's a giant, dangerous beast of a creature, and bringing it into a highly populated city planet is probably not a good idea. And also the Jedi have sympathies towards it being a creature, the last of its kind, that probably should be set free and go live out the rest of its life wherever it needs to do that. Just not on Malastare. So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got...
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. We got the approach of Star Destroyer, good guy Star Destroyer dropping this thing off. I thought it was odd that Sheev comes out to actually meet this thing. It seems irresponsible as the president of the entire universe to come out and greet this deadly beast as it's coming into the capital city. Ryan, last week we talked quite a bit about Godzilla. This episode is kind of akin to King Kong.
Totally.
My question to you maybe is, what is the likelihood that there, as a paleontologist, that there is some sort of cryptozoological beast out there that we could find and then bring to Washington or Quebec or LA or something to wreak havoc on our cities?
Well, I just don't know why you would. Excuse me. I did think about that because if the time it takes for them to bring the Zillo Beast from Malastare to Coruscant, I imagine whatever scientific equipment you needed to study the Zillo Beast could have been sent from Coruscant to Malastare. Right. And so, I don't know, it just seems silly that you would bring it to this completely populated area and not just keep the stun beams on it the whole time like they did in the previous episode. In terms of the likelihood of a giant cryptid beast like that being found, in the fossil record, it's entirely possible we find giant fossils all the time. There was one just announced earlier this week. But a living thing, your best bet is deep in the ocean, and there's no way anything from deep in the ocean would still be alive by the time it made it to a research facility on land. If anything, we would only know about it because it washed up on the beach dead. I mean, that was how we knew about giant squid for many years. We had stories of kraken attacking ships and things like that, and we knew that there was an animal deep in the ocean that was like a giant squid because they would wash up on the shore, but it was only in the past couple of years that we actually filmed one alive in the deep ocean. Japanese team did that. So, there's plenty more stuff to discover, but the odds of finding something that could actually survive in a city on land and do damage before we took it out is pretty low. I'll say pretty low.
So a pack room situation is going to be pretty low, I'm assuming, in that situation.
I think so.
So what I got out of that is that it's possible.
Well, scientists
that slim little chance.
Scientists are pretty hesitant to say that anything is impossible. That's not really in our vocabulary. We tend to deal. We are unlike Sith. We do not tend to deal in absolutes.
No, I'm glad you brought up the equipment thing, though, because that's definitely a thing I said last week. The idea of bringing this thing to a highly populated area makes zero sense. I brought up the idea that Coruscant can't possibly be the only city planet that has scientific equipment to do what they need to do.
If anything, the real estate is probably much more expensive. It would be more cost-effective to do it somewhere else.
Right.
So I'm guessing that this lab was already built, and they were just waiting to find something like this, to put it to good use, because you don't want to tax the entire galaxy and use that money to create a facility and then not have the opportunity to see said facility in action.
I mean, maybe you don't. I would.
Fair enough.
I would absolutely do that.
Yeah, because what's weird is like when they bring it in. So just going through what happens really quickly. Zillo Beast shows up. Palpatine is there. Mace, Anakin, R2 fly in. They all meet each other. But then like right behind Palpatine is this giant air hangar that's just empty, waiting for this thing to be thrown in there.
Yeah, sitting on top of some building somewhere.
Yeah.
With no landing ramp or anything.
I mean, this thing was already living underground. Why wouldn't you just... we have underground research facilities today that are scientific facilities that exist underground.
Area 51.
Area 51, Large Hadron Collider. Their neutrino detectors tend to be pretty deep underground. So if this thing was the Chunnel, not necessarily a research station, but a feat of engineering, if nothing else. And so I think if you found this thing underground and you wanted to keep it viable, you would just put it also in an underground bunker, because then it hadn't broken out of the underground area until they bombed it. So if you just put it underground again, presumably as strong as it is, it can't just punch through the crust and run around.
So was this thing dormant underground?
That's a good question. I was wondering that as well. I have to assume it was. I mean, what does it eat? Right?
Yeah.
I wonder this in Star Wars all the time, because you have like the worm on the asteroid in Empire Strikes Back trying to eat the Millennium Falcon. I don't imagine the Falcon would be a particularly good nutrition source.
Right, unless you're a Minoc.
And then the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi, it's digesting things for 1,000 years, not very efficient, not sure how often it's getting fed. And Yoda doesn't understand energy bars. Like, I'm always confused by what people in Star Wars are eating to sustain themselves. And so this is no exception. I don't know what it was doing. It must have been dormant. I wonder if it has sort of the metabolism of one of the water bears, those little microscopic organisms that can go into an extreme stasis, an extreme hibernation where they like self-desiccate, they get rid of all their water, and they just kind of curl up in this dried little chrysalis, and they can survive the vacuum of space and all that stuff. So I wonder if it's maybe like that, just on a gigantic macro scale, but it is a curious question of what this thing is eating.
Okay. Well stated. Fair enough.
I do my best.
Yeah.
Lorenzo, what we got going next? We meet the Zillo Beast. We meet all of our people in this thing, and we're gonna kind of be going back and forth between arguing about the Zillo Beast, kinda for the middle portion of this episode, and what people think should be done with it. Mace's idea last episode was to take it to like the far outer rim and just kind of drop it off and then let it live there. I don't know, just on an asteroid, on a planet. I'm not really sure. I don't think that this was a good idea. I think that's pretty much a death sentence for said Zillo Beast. The doctor, Dr. Bull, wants to do some sort of research. She's kind of non-specific about what she's actually going to do to this thing. And Sheevil straight up just wants to kill it and use its parts to make armor, or I don't know. He talks about unlocking the secrets of the Zillo Beast, but I don't really know what that means or where he got this idea. So kind of for the next several minutes of the episode, we just jump around from groups of people talking about what needs to be done with this thing. And we go back and forth between Sheev and the doctor, and Sheev's like, nope, you're going to kill this thing, otherwise I'm going to replace you, find somebody that can. So what she has done is taken the fuel from Malastare and converted it into like an airborne toxin that they try to use to knock this Zillo Beast out, and it does not go so well. So at that point, we have a breakout scene, and the first thing I thought was, no shit, this is obviously going to happen. The second thing I thought was, is this thing punching through the wall or the door or what? And then we have like all these tanks and lats and shit lined up on the outside, and like 3 clone troopers, and they basically don't do anything except for kind of stare at it and get smashed by the door. And apparently
they get fucked up too.
Apparently all these tanks are like unmanned or something, because we have to come back to those later. But the doctor luckily didn't get dead and comes out, and Zillo Beast has been escaped for, I don't know, like 2 seconds, and has already started like 2 fires and is wreaking havoc on the city, crawling around on some skyscrapers and pulling a King Kong. So
yeah, the way it was crawling around was really interesting, because this episode, getting to those kaiju references, it did a good job of kind of mixing both Godzilla and King Kong references
right
into one. So like, as with the last one, like visually, it definitely, up against tanks and stuff, it definitely resembled Godzilla, had the roar, all that. This one, as it's climbing through Coruscant, it stops to look into windows, which I think is funny. There's that line about the thing possibly being intelligent, and I found it interesting that as it was crawling around Coruscant, it definitely has a moment where it figures out that the Senate building is where Palpatine is, and it's like on a direct mission to
like beeline straight there.
Down.
I think it proves its intelligence pretty quickly. As soon as Palpatine starts talking shit about it, he's giving him the evil eye, and the doc sees it. She's like, yeah, I don't really think that. I don't think that thing liked what you're saying about it. Ryan, have you ever been put in a situation where you were asked to do something scientifically that you did not agree with morally?
No. The biggest debates I've had in my scientific career are mostly just like different groups of scientists have different interpretations of the same set of data. So that might sound like a quibble, and that's because it is. Because when you really get down to doing true academic, publishable research, it really does come down to the details. And so we'll take the same data set, and one group will run a certain set of statistical analyses on it, another group might run a slightly different statistical analyses, or even just the same analyses but in a different program that might run the code a little bit differently, and we end up with a very slight difference in the interpretation of the data, and that leads to a giant fight and a lot of meaningful discussions about what the data really means and what story is it telling. And that's good, because that's how you figure out that's how you hopefully get to some truth, or at least two different versions of what might be happening, and a future research team or the same research team can follow up on it and figure it out for sure. So that's actually part of the process, and it's a good thing. I did think about how I would handle this situation if I were Dr. Bull, though, and I have a pretty clear idea of what I would do, and I'm not even going to claim that this is the ethical way to handle it or the most robust scientific way to handle it, but I'm coming at it from a person who has a strong affinity for animals and really likes animals and wants to do right by animals. Every scientific project I've done has always been done with the highest level of scrutiny and consideration of animal welfare. Even as a person who mostly works with fossils, I do still work on modern animals, and so even a modern animal that's already dead, I make sure that I have all the permits and proper permissions before I take any samples from it or something like that. So given all that, Dr. Bull really messed up here.
Yeah.
She didn't handle this right. Here's what you do, team. You tell Chancellor Palpatine, oh yeah, I'll totally turn that fuel into the special toxin. And then a week later, you're just like, yeah, I don't know. The synthesis is just going really slow. I guess whatever catalyst we use isn't quite efficient enough, and it's a real rate limiting step. You just throw in a bunch of jargony words. And then a week after that, you'd be like, yeah, we're probably ready to run some preliminary tests on the gas you asked to develop. And then you would just release helium or something, and I don't know, it didn't work. And then I would just draw it out, and I could probably, I'm guessing, get 6 to 8 months out of that line, and by that time I hopefully would have secretly learned enough about the Zillo Beast to do something useful for its welfare and well-being. So that's how I would have handled it.
I think that is a great approach. Definitely not something that I would have thought of.
Would Palpatine know that I'm lying, though? That's the question.
Ooh, that's an even better question. Yes, and
I'm assuming
no.
that Dr. Bull is not force sensitive.
Probably not.
It does not seem to be.
She's listed as like an unknown species from an unknown planet, so she's even more mysterious than Yoda, because in like the official Clone Wars character guide, Yoda's home planet is described as Coruscant, which is one, bizarre, and two, interesting that there's characters that are less known about than Yoda as far as their backgrounds go.
Perhaps nobody knows that at this point, because it took me a second when I first started watching the episode. It took me a second to remember, because the Star Wars Minute guys just finished Revenge of the Sith a couple of months back, but still.
Right.
That's the prequel that's most recently in my mind. And so it took me a second to remember that this takes place in between clones and Sith.
Yep.
So we don't know that Palpatine, quote unquote, that Palpatine is strong in the Force. And so I guess Dr. Bull would have no way of knowing that, but I might, in that 6 to 8 month stretch where I was trying to string them along, go to Mace Windu or one of the Jedi if I had access to them and say, like, hey, so here's what I'm actually doing, and I could probably use your help because I'm not sure the Chancellor's buying it. But I'm not even claiming I would have that level of insight, but if I got a whiff that my story was not being believed anymore, that might be what I would do. Then.
Yeah, you probably would have already been taken out in some sort of lab accident, would be my guess. It's a good question as to whether or not Palpatine would be able to use his Force abilities to kind of sense what's going on, because I would imagine that he has to dull down his ability to use the Force to keep himself hidden from, thousands of Jedi that live across the street or whatever. So you might be safe in that regard, Ryan.
I'll take it.
You got at least 6 months.
Okay.
So
six Coruscantian months.
Which I think is probably Galactic Standard Time. But I don't know what that equates to in Earth time.
Yeah, that's its own thing we've talked about, and we don't know how to answer.
I think we've tried to figure it out before. I remember a long time ago reading on... I think Stars.com used to have like a holocron vault or some shit where it was like Wikipedia before Wikipedia existed and long before Wikipedia existed. And it defined time, and it was similar to that of Earth, except for the number of like days in a week and a year were different. So that is pretty well relevant to anything that we're talking about currently. As far as the plot goes, what we got coming up next?
Yeah, where were we? So we do have a scene that kind of cuts into this Zillo Beast action where, so there's kind of a B plot with Mace that's kind of happening. So Mace talks to Obi-Wan, and they both agree that bringing the Zillo Beast to Coruscant's a bad idea. And Mace is like, well, I already tried talking to Palpatine on Malastare, and it clearly didn't work, so they both come up with this idea to get somebody else to ask him, which is Anakin. They know Anakin gets along very well with
Anakin and Sheev are buddies.
So then, yes. So Obi-Wan and Padme kind of trick Anakin to meeting them at the Senate. And they kind of get him... He immediately sees what's happening, so he goes along with the plan to go with Padme to talk to Palpatine about maybe treating the animal with some respect, right?
Yeah, I'm going to pause you real quick here, because this goes back to something that Ryan said earlier, and the fact that these stories take place between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. In Revenge of the Sith, this same little plot happens. Like, we'll draw Anakin in, we'll send him into Palpatine, well, they're buddies, we'll get them to fucking work it out. And then we'll get some info out of Anakin. it works well here. It works well there. It works well here, but it doesn't work well in both places because if it works well here, like Anakin sniffs it out as soon as they start talking.
Yes.
So he should, but when it happens in episode 3, he shouldn't be surprised. He should be more like, all right, again, like, come on, guys. Haven't you figured something else out yet? And that's the difficulty of having call forwards or whatever to things that happen in the future but actually happened in the past is it's hard for those things to line up later and make sense, the sense that they did, when you have other stories kind of repeating the beats, which can be a drawback in some situations.
Yeah, this episode is filled with a lot of callbacks and call forwards. There are lines that get repeated. C3, like later on, we're just jumping forward in the episode that doesn't really disrupt anything story-wise, but like C3PO has his
We're doomed.
bloody
We're
the "we're
doomed
doomed" line. Yeah.
I've got a bad feeling about this. It was in there too.
Yep. That happens. Palpatine says that on the ship.
That's right.
As soon as Anakin starts messing around with the ship. So there's a few of those that happen in this. So that's the thing with these prequels that kind of get shoehorned in a little bit. And I agree with you. We've had this discussion before as well regarding things that are happening afterwards, but in the chronological timeline it's happening before. And yeah, I agree. It's odd that Anakin doesn't mention.
Lucky for us that we're approaching this through chronology, not through when the episodes came out, so we don't have that issue as much as when you're viewing things out of timeline. So I guess that's a positive for what we're doing, I suppose.
Because also like with the Zillo Beast kind of fucking shit up on Coruscant, like when does this get fixed, by the way? Right? Like, so just jumping forward a little bit. So the Zillo Beast escapes. It causes a bunch of havoc. We see citizens totally dying. And then at the end of the episode, like, nobody brings it back up. There's no memorials. Nobody's sad for these citizens that got lost.
That happens in between this episode and next episode. It's all right.
We're just brushing past it because, like, look, even at the end of King Kong, everybody's kind of standing around going, "Okay, that happened. We need to."
See, Palpatine's mad because the Zillo Beast killed a bunch of people and broke a bunch of buildings and stuff, but he's even more mad because he's been duped by Ryan for the past 6 months.
Dr. Ball, please. I've earned that degree.
Yes.
Dr. Ryan Bowl.
Ryan, am not a doctor, as you can tell by my grasp of the English language in that sentence. But, yeah, as Dr. Ball, I did wonder how you get a doctorate in the Star Wars universe, a universe that seems to be by and large illiterate. And so I'm wondering, like, if you just learn to read, do you get a doctorate in the Star Wars universe?
Yeah, or if you just maybe can spell it and stick it at the beginning of your name.
I was thinking about. Okay, so Dr. Ball is the one who developed the bomb in the previous episode. That's clearly like an EMP, electromagnetic pulse style bomb. They call it like an electron wave. And so she's some sort of engineer to design that bomb, but then she's also like knows enough biology to study this random beast that they found and try to develop armor from it. And that, to me, was maybe the least accurate depiction of how the scientific method, maybe not method, but the actual process of doing science goes. Because in real science, what would happen is that we'd find the beast, and if I was a scientist who had made this bomb or even just had studied the principles that made the bomb possible, sort of an Einstein type thing, I wouldn't try to study the beast myself, but I would probably know a guy. And so really, like, they're they could have introduced a new character that actually studied the beast, because it's just as realistic as the Star Wars universe is, it just stretches credulity that one person, one being, I guess, you're not technically a person, but one being would be competent enough to design both an EMP bomb and study the biology of a as yet unknown alien, giant alien with a completely novel anatomy. So, yeah, let's call it out.
There was a lot of words there, some of which I understood, some of which I didn't, but I did kind of get stuck on whether or not she is a person. Is there a difference?
She wasn't a human. She still is a person in the larger sense and still has clearly intelligence and agency. I just didn't want to, human race, we're not doing great these days, and I just feel bad whenever I accidentally accuse someone of being human when they might not be.
I understand.
Yeah, don't bring her down to our level.
No, I think she's clearly a superior being, and I didn't want to paint her with the brush of humanity.
She is a doctor of science-y things, I think.
But I agree with you. I didn't think about it explicitly on those terms, but it is weird that one person designed a bomb and they're totally cool with just field testing that shit, and there isn't a group of people who are like, all right, let's see how this works out.
I mean, that is kind of how Tony Stark operates.
That is true.
She could be a Tony Stark type where, it's like, when did you become an expert on sciencey word, and then you go, oh, last night.
So
maybe on the flight from Alistair to Coruscant, she became an expert in xenobiology.
So in the Star Wars universe, is Tony Stark also a doctor?
No, Tony Stark's not a doctor in the Marvel universe.
Well, I realize that.
I think he's got a master's. And so maybe he's Master Stark, much like Master Kenobi and Master Windu.
Oh, man.
So Tony Stark is higher ranked than Anakin?
Well, isn't Anakin well, they're both generals and masters, right? They're generals in the Republic Army, but they're masters in the Jedi ranking. It's kind of like if you were a colonel in the army, but also a physician, you'd be a doctor colonel, right? You'd have two titles simultaneously.
Or you cooked fried chicken. But yes and no, Anakin is a master. So he is the master of Ahsoka, his Padawan, but he's still a Jedi Knight. So he's not a Jedi Master, but those terms are kind of, they kind of bleed into each other. So if Tony Stark is a master, if he's Master Stark, then he would definitely outrank Anakin.
Anakin in the Jedi Order, because he's on the council.
I think Tony would agree with that.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. He would make it happen in any case. He would definitely get Anakin demoted just to be able to claim that.
Anakin would pull something to him that was behind Tony. It would go right past Tony's ear to try to freak Tony out, and Tony would just be like, yeah, cute.
Awesome, yeah. And then zap it away.
Exactly, then blast him with a repulsor or something like that.
Yeah. Get the nanobots
have
on it.
All kinds of Iron Man suits swarming Anakin. No, now I'm thinking of the Anakin Buster Iron Man suit.
Oh gosh.
Which would have to have a robe.
It would just have to be on the higher ground, and then it'd be fine.
I was just about to say that.
Or just look like Shmi.
Right. Yeah.
Very true.
Or just a bunch of
Shmi made of sand. Sandman, really. The Spider-Man villain Sandman would be Anakin's greatest foe.
So then the other question is, where do these people go to school? Because we only know about the Jedi Temple, right? But then, in Rebels, Ezra we never see going to school ever, right? Anakin's a slave. We never see him going to school. And then higher education, if you start schooling on Tatooine, do those credits transfer to Coruscant, or...
Well, there's the Imperial Academy, whatever that is, and Padme went to...
But the Empire hasn't been established yet at this point, so it's just the Republic.
Academy?
Yeah.
Maybe. So all schooling is derived to push people into politics, maybe? I mean, Padme went to, politics camp as, a 9-year-old or something.
I mean, I'm guessing each planet has, their... Board of Governors, or their there's that Board of Governors, I think it was called, where it's each state here in the U.S. has they they send high school students to do like fake democracy for a week, come up with their own legislative agenda. So I'm guessing each planet has something like that in preparing young people to join the Galactic Senate. She did say she went to like diplomacy camp, right? And that's where she kissed Paolo.
Yep.
Oh man, she sounds so nerdy.
That was the beginning of the end for Anakin.
When he was a minor, or like?
Yeah, no, because of his jealousy is what I meant.
Okay. All right. So where were we in this episode? We're kind of hopping around in this one.
We were at the point where
Anakin gas is released, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The gas was released the first time. Right. Zillo Beast gets out. Anakin is talking to Palpatine. They're talking. So Anakin and Padme go talk to Sheev, and whatever Palpatine is saying about the moral responsibility of killing this animal for the betterment of all mankind.
Yeah, this was a really weird episode of The Good Place. I did not expect this much moral philosophy in the Clone Wars, but here we are.
Yeah, because even what's his name, Maz Ameda? He jumps in with the thing too, like, and he gets like a full like one shot. Yeah, he gets like a real close up. Like you can see the details,
the textures on his face. Yeah, I thought.
Yeah, and I was just like, where has he been this entire episode to like be talking up this much right now?
Well, he called him speaker. So is Maz Ameda like the Paul Ryan of the Galactic Senate? Like, is he just the spineless little dweeb that does whatever Palpatine says and has no actual agenda of his own?
That's
essentially yes.
Analogy. That's an awesome analogy.
I said it.
Yes.
So Maz Ameda is from the Wisconsin of the Star Wars universe?
Basically.
It's the People's Republic of Coruscant.
This is going to be a dated reference if he does not win the election, but I would love to see the iron stash of the Star Wars Wisconsin planet.
That'll be all right. But yes, you are correct. He is essentially the Speaker of the House. He's the right-hand man of the Chancellor. And the odd thing is that he was with the Chancellor before Palpatine, and then I guess just
the Chancellor Valorum?
Yes. He was the right-hand dude to Chancellor Valorum, and I guess just stayed in power. And in the old EU, I don't know if it's still that way, but along the way of Palpatine's ascension to Emperor, Maz Ameda was in on it, so he knew what was going on. He knew the duality of Palpatine and Sidious, and was complacent in the entire thing.
I think my Paul Ryan analogy holds, having heard that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll stick with
it. Oh, yeah. And his anger issues definitely fit as well. His random outbursts, especially towards Padme too. It's
also like he almost did the right thing for 5 or 6 seconds, and then was like, "Yeah, forget it. It's fine."
Yeah, like greater good. He keeps bringing up greater good too, and all I kept thinking was, I don't know how much you guys remember, but Hot Fuzz.
The greater good.
The greater good. Stop saying greater good.
I'm a slasher. Catch me. Yeah.
What did they do? Murdered. Who did they murder? Shakespeare. What?
Yeah, that's a great line.
Like, oh God.
I feel like Anakin is definitely the like. Well, wait till the team has a this, and then turns around and everybody is like, "Hooray, you're leaving."
Yeah. Precisely. So, and then the Zillo Beast is the goose that they can't catch. So.
I had to explain to a friend of mine once that like the whole point of that subplot is that it's literally a wild goose chase, and they were like, "Oh, I didn't get that." Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's literally yes. It's all
I've only
there.
seen Hot Fuzz once. Now I need to revisit it, and I will rejoin
film.
the conversation later.
And it actually has a monster movie homage in it, because there's a tiny town, kind of Arrested Development style that they stomp around and wreak havoc upon. Did you guys talk about the design of the Zillo Beast in the previous episode? I don't want to cover topics you've already talked about, but
no, we have not, and it's something that I wanted to ask you about, because
it's cool,
you
right?
are you are more educated in the
How animals work.
Yeah.
Department.
I don't have the words. Biological structure, I guess. Like this thing's
Evolutionary advantages of scales, 2 legs, 3 arms, a tail.
Well, yeah. That's
situation.
There's my question. How does a 3-armed beast function?
So what? Sorry, you broke up a little bit.
How does a 3-armed beast function as far as like the skeletal system?
I mean, that's a good question because we've not seen that. I mean, so presumably... Sorry, finish your question. I cut you off.
Nope, you're good. I was going to say, does this thing have a skeleton? Is it just like an exoskeleton? It's like these segmented armor pieces, but
yeah.
I would assume that on the scale of this thing, it's like, what do we say? Lorenzo is 97 meters long, so it's like 287 feet, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's big. Large. And it's built out of all these little sections, and they don't like the ankles and the wrists and stuff don't seem to have solid joints. They just kind of seem to flex and flow.
That's a good point.
At each segment. But my big question is like the triple hip and the triple shoulder.
Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about that. I assumed when I first watched this was a vertebrate in that it has a distinct spinal column, a vertebral column with a spinal cord in that vertebral column, but obviously that would include us, basically everything from the most primitive, we don't say primitive in science anymore, we try to say basal, which just means towards the base of the family tree. So the most basal fish up to us are all vertebrates.
So is Italian cooking like at the bottom of the barrel because of the basil then?
Well, I mean, I got strong opinions on Italian cooking because tomatoes are from the New World, noodles are from China. So I feel like Italian cooking is just a parasite of world cuisine. A delicious parasite.
Man. It's fusion.
Fusion. It's the original fusion cuisine.
Right?
Yes. So if you,
Lorenzo is Italian and takes offense to making fun of the noodle tomato combo.
I love a noodle with a tomato sauce. It's not a criticism of the final product. It's just a simple statement about where those different ingredients came from. Basil is spelled B-A-S-A-L, and it's referring to like being at the base of the evolutionary divergence of a particular group.
Right.
Yes, I've never heard anybody make that pun before, so well done. I assumed this thing was a vertebrate, but now that you're pointing out its segmented nature and its overall flexibility, I actually think you might be onto something here. I think this might be something more in the echinoderm phylum, which is the phylum that includes things like urchins and starfish and sea lilies and ophiuroids, brittle stars. So if you haven't, starfish tend to be the emblematic animal of that group because they actually are animals. But if there are actually a lot more mobile versions within that group, within that phylum, and they don't have an internal skeleton, so their entire skeletal structure is external in the form of hard calcified plates, and they are able to move around with they don't have muscles even inside their skeleton. They have a hydraulic system that actually they're able to pump fluid through and create pressure differentials, and that's how they move around using these little things called tube feet. And so I'm wondering if the Zillo Beast is actually a giant modified, because with the 3 legs and the 3 arms and the head, it kind of actually does have a 7-pointed star symmetry. You could like convince yourself of that, I think. Most echinoderms don't have a head region per se, but we're going to say that this one is highly evolved or derived, as we might say in the sciences. So instead of evolved, which again has a connotation, we say derived, which just means not basal. So I'm thinking this might be like a really highly evolved starfish. Sea star, because they're not really fish. Yeah. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think that you just said a lot of things that I should agree with because you're the expert on these things.
Well, because I was like leaning towards like an armadillo place, right? Because it's armored.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about like animals that are armored. And they're subterranean.
Beast.
Armadillos do like to dig, so they spend a lot of time underground. They don't get this big, obviously, but like the big, you know, they have fossil relatives, these animals called glyptodons, that did get about as big as a Volkswagen Beetle.
Very nice.
And hence still were fully armored, not as mobile. They weren't able to climb like the Zillo Beast can climb. But armadillo's closest relatives are the anteaters and the sloths. Sloths are very good climbers. So maybe this. So I think this thing could be a highly derived sea star echinoderm, or it could be a heavily modified armadillo sloth type beast.
Let me know if this sways your decision. The Zillo Beast is officially described as a reptilian insectoid species.
I have a big problem with the way that the Star Wars Wikipedia does that, because I've seen things described as like insectoid mammaloids or whatever before, and it's just like it just doesn't work in my mind, where like the way I think about animals, I do tend to just categorize them in their categories, and that's not to say that the categories aren't up for debate, but I'm trying to think of an analogy that would be like it would sort of not having an easy time coming up with an analogy because it's just so far removed. It would sort of be like saying like, well, that's like it's a savory Oreo. I'm like, well, I don't really want a savory Oreo. I'm not really sure that should be a thing. So it's just you've taken one descriptor and you've applied it to a thing that isn't in any way close to that. Sea stars, the group, the echinoderms, the group of animals I was thinking this might be a part of, are actually more closely related to us mammals than insects. So I was actually keeping it tighter in the family tree than the Wikipedia was, even by going to something as seemingly alien. I think echinoderms are some of the most alien-looking animals we have on planet Earth. The fact that a sea star, this 5-pointed star with no discernible head region that moves around with this little hydraulic tube system, is an animal. Like, that's kind of crazy to me.
So do they contain a brain and a vascular system?
Nope, not really. They have a hemolymph system, so essentially we have a distinctive, we humans, mammals, higher order vertebrates, have a distinctive lymphatic system and blood vascular system. But animals that haven't quite gotten to that stage tend to have just sort of and they're also all very small, right? And relatively uniform in their body plan. They tend to just have like we call it hemolymph, so it's essentially just sort of transportation fluid that kind of just exists in their body cavity to transport nutrients around sort of passively. They don't have like a pumping system like our heart does. And none of the echinoderms, which is the group that includes the sea stars, the brittle stars, the sea cucumbers, the sea lilies, none of them are what we call encephalized, which means they don't have a distinctive head region where the sensory organs that we have. So most animals that echinoderms excluded have sort of a distinctive head region where sensory organs like hearing, taste, smell, sight are localized, and they're very near a sort of brain, or at least a clump of nerve cells that can function as a brain. And yeah, animals like sea stars just don't have anything like that.
Very, very nice, very nice.
But Zillo Beast clearly does, because it's clearly intelligent. It even understands Basic, which did the subalboids speak Basic before they were colonized? That's where I'm sort of not clear on what the story is what happened previous to the first Zillo Beast episode where they're on the Subalba planet. It is the Subalba planet, right?
It is. They are Doug's. Say Bulba would have been from Malastare. You are correct there. It's the first time that we see Malastare, so you didn't miss anything there.
It doesn't look nice.
It does not look nice. No. Oddly enough, I think it is described as a forested planet.
I saw that.
Which is weird.
I would debate that.
Because category. You see zero forests. You just kind of see some mucky, gray cliffs and such. Not too much going on.
Maybe the trees were where the fuel was coming from.
Yeah.
Potentially. I guess
nice
that
and
could
green. Yeah.
But yeah, you didn't, as far as chronologically running through the story, you did not miss anything.
I mean, Malster kind of looks like Pride Rock after Scar took over.
Yeah, just sad and dead and gray. This
I guess
episode brings up something interesting, though. So regarding this creature's intelligence, we've kind of had this... Another episode kind of brought it up, where when you come across a new creature, like in the Star Wars universe, there's kind of a clear delineation between sentient being and animal to some degree. Because, like, everything's a creature of some sort. So I just...
Yeah, it's basically it's like either something that wears pants or it's like a beast of burden. Like, those are the two things that we see in the Star Wars universe, and this one is neither of those.
I feel like if you put pants on this, it would not be a far cry from Fing Fang Foom from the Marvel Comics universe.
Okay. What about a shirt? I mean,
Fing Fang Foom never wears a shirt. It'd be hard to wear a shirt with three arms.
I agree.
Yeah, how would you
I can't even figure out how this 3-arm thing works.
Because do we see that third arm really? The third arm does grab like a tank at some point or something like that, right? I think in the first episode
it uses all three of them, and it's not exactly like center of its back. They're kind of oriented like a tripod. And at first I thought I had like 3 arms and 3 legs, but then I realized that one of them's a tail, even though it does kind of use it for locomotion at sometimes.
Which, I mean, kangaroos do that.
Mm-hmm.
My dachshund does that to balance himself when he wants to stand up and beg for things.
Yep, there were ground sloths that probably did that same tactic with the using the third leg as a little tripod to lean back on their haunches and stand upright. So yeah, it's happened. It's there's precedent in the current biological and past fossil record.
Okay.
Yeah, but this third arm, I'm still trying to figure out as I
get
at a picture.
I get stuck on it every time that I watch either of these two episodes.
I can accept it as part of the design, but I honestly don't think it's necessary. I think they could have done the episode without it, and nothing really would have changed. I would have believed that the monster was as dangerous and as powerful without the third arm.
Would it have been better or worse to have either 2 or 4? And which would you prefer?
I would have believed it as an insectoid if it had 6 limbs, right? I mean, that's all insects are. That's a consistency amongst the insects is 6 limbs,
right?
So yeah, they did kind of split the difference there, and I think maybe just skewing towards one or the other. It does help with its alienness, but the fact that it looks alien in a way that doesn't seem useful or reasonable does kind of, and it doesn't play a role in the episode as far as I can tell. Like, there's no point at which Mace Windu is like, my God, it's got a third arm, what do we do? Like, that doesn't happen. So I feel like you could have just ignored that and the episode is basically the same.
That was like a spot-on Mace Windu impression, by the way.
Thank you.
I would vote to have you replace the guy that does the Mace Windu voiceovers on these shows. So, kudos to you.
Well, if only they were still producing new episodes of Clone Wars.
And they are, Ryan. I don't know if you heard, but Season 7 is approaching, or, will be coming to us sometime next year.
Wow. You guys better hurry up. You get there in time.
Fuck, we're doing one of these a week. It's like 2.5 years long. So it's not.
Oh yeah.
It's not a sprint. We're on a marathon.
I hear you.
For sure.
We haven't decided what we're going to do with the new episodes because there's a new animated show coming out called Star Wars Resistance, and that starts this coming
next week.
Well, next week as of recording, but as of release, this coming Sunday. So
yeah,
potentially we're going to be interweaving 2 different series into one podcast stream.
Oh wow!
For both weekly releases. So we'll see how that goes. But
yeah, we're keeping ourselves busy because we're not smart like you.
Whether it's intelligence or not, I'm still also exhausted by doing a podcast as often as I do. So I don't think really that plays into it at all. Do you guys read comics at all? Are you guys comic book guys?
I was, and I fell so far behind so quickly.
The design of the Zillo Beast sort of reminds me of Paul Chadwick, who did the Concrete series back in the 80s and 90s, and also did a comic called The World Below. He kind of has if Jack Kirby had been working in the late 80s and been influenced by sort of the Ninja Turtles black and white indie comic style. That's a description that makes any sort of sense.
It does.
And so I sort of see that in the design of this beast. It's a really cool design. I like it a lot. I think it works, the third arm notwithstanding, but it just sort of reminded me of Paul Chadwick's comic art.
I'm going to say one more thing about this third arm, and then I think we can move forward from there. I do think it works. It just visually, sometimes it looks like this Zillo Beast has a real broad shoulder with just an arm sticking out the back, and sometimes it looks like it is more of a tripod configuration. But overall, it's different enough that it gives this thing one more step of being unique that pulls me into the episode, and I want to see what's going on with this guy, where he came from, where he's going, and I guess we know where he's been, so we think we know where he's headed. So Lorenzo, where's he going?
Where are we going? Were we still in Palpatine's office last?
I think so.
We keep hopping around,
yeah. Basically, the Zillo Beast has figured out where Palpatine is, and he's headed across town.
One last thing to note in that office scene, which I thought was really funny, was Anakin tries to stay neutral the entire time, and Padme gets real mad, real fucking mad. And
because they're already married at this point, right?
Yes. So they're having a marital squabble while trying to hide the fact. Yes.
And he basically shrugs his shoulders, and he was like, hey, I'm on your side, but didn't you hear him? He's got some good points. I mean,
he did not have any good points, though.
Listen to the guy. I mean, he said words like morality and good of the people. I mean, how can you disagree with that?
How can you disagree with the greater good?
So I thought about this more in the first episode when they first find the Zillo Beast and they're kind of debating what to do. But that whole debate of we just found this thing we thought was extinct, do we kill it? Reminded me a lot of the way we tend to handle endangered species here in the U.S. because I've done some work with the wolves up in Yellowstone National Park, which were reintroduced in the mid-90s, and they've done very well since then, because when you reintroduce wolves to an area that hasn't had them for 100 years, turns out there's a lot of food. And so they had plenty to eat and subsequently proliferated it and
quickly.
And created a bunch of new packs, and it was only a matter of time before some of those packs were going to be existing outside of the park. And so that's created a lot of tension. I did my PhD work at the University of Wyoming, so this was kind of a local issue in that state. And so there was a lot of debate around, what do you do when the wolves are back and you still want to have ranch land, you still want to have a golf course, and you still want to have, tourism when there are wolves running around. And so I thought about that while I was watching the first episode in this two-parter because it felt very authentic to me that the government would be like, oh, we just found this new thing. Should we start issuing hunting licenses for it? Because this is what keeps happening in the U.S., where it's grizzly bears are taken off the endangered species list in Montana, and instantly people are like, oh, can we shoot them? And I'm like, no. They're not all over the place. They're just not endangered anymore. Like, we don't need to just immediately put a gun in their face.
We don't need to put them back on the list immediately.
Right. What? Like,
so
yeah. So
we
anyway,
need to add like another. We need to add another tier to the list. So it's like, I don't know where it's at the bottom, like extremely endangered, and then above that's endangered, and then
the bottom
not,
of the list
not
is
endangered.
is extinct.
Yep, that would be the bottom. And then once we get past endangered, it's like populated, and then somewhere along the line, way up there, needs to be like huntable.
Yeah, it would be great if we could have like. It would be great if there. I actually think that's a really good idea. To the point where I will bring that up. Not that I have any say in the matter, but if asked, I will bring it up. But yeah, it extinct is the bottom, and then there's like extinct in the wild because there are animals that are now only alive in zoos. And then there's like highly endangered, just regular endangered, and then threatened, and then I think the least severe part of that list is near threatened.
Right.
So.
Completely unrelated topic, but you kind of broached the subject.
Least concern is actually if they're just fine. So what you're saying is we need least concern, and then we need so least concern that they're huntable again. So
Yes.
I legit, I am not just pandering. I love that idea. I think that's a really clever way to handle species management in America and the world.
And then like people would know, this one, yes, that one, no.
Right, like white-tailed deer, yeah, you can shoot them because we killed all the wolves, so nothing else is hunting them. But but like give the wolves a chance to come back before we start shooting the wolves again.
But you do need to get a hunting license, and you do need to wear a wolf suit.
Well, that's the
you
other
need
thing
to
that
dress
kills
as a
me
wolf.
is like it was a couple of years ago. It was like 2 years ago. The wolves were finally doing well enough that one made it to Colorado, and it was shot almost immediately. And the guy who shot it said he had a hunting license for coyote, and he said he thought it was a coyote. And I'm like, if you can't tell the difference between a wolf and a coyote, I don't think we should be giving you a hunting license. Like, if in Wyoming, if you had an elk license, if you were allowed to hunt elk, or an elk tag as they call it, and you accidentally shot a moose and just said, I thought it was an elk, that would not be a valid excuse. So it shouldn't count for carnivores just because they superficially look similar. Like, get it together. And also that guy was lying. He knew it was a wolf and he wanted to shoot it for fun. And so I wanted to call that out on both the surface and the subtext that was happening. But yes, anyway, total derailment. My apologies.
Oh, no, it's all good.
Ryan, this is what we do.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm in it.
So
Yeah, in the last episode, I went on like a 20-minute rant about James Bond somehow.
Yeah,
so.
there was Lorenzo gets on his movie rants a lot, and so last episode we had like 15 minutes of Godzilla backstory and lore and whatnot, and 15-20 minutes of James Bond, and I don't remember how James Bond tied into what we were talking about, but
It was
I'm
because-
afraid to even bring it up.
I mean,
this
both
week.
these episodes are really good homages to, the old monster movies.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where it led off, because Kevin was asking how this played in the rules of monster movies we have seen before. And then I brought up that Godzilla always kind of makes up the rules as it goes anyways. Like, there are reboots and refreshes that are similar to what James Bond does, But yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier in this one plays really well between both King Kong and Godzilla. Like, there are visual references to both.
Yep.
The last one definitely was more Godzilla-like with the tanks and lasering it down. But once you get a thing crawling on buildings, we're definitely in some King Kong territory here. Especially, again, the way it looks into like individual apartment buildings, the way it even kind of slaps people around. King Kong's definitely a smaller franchise in which there are only like 4 standalone films really, and a couple spin-offs. So there's King Kong 33, King Kong 74 or something like that, Peter Jackson's 2005 King Kong, the one that came out last year, Kong Skull Island. Then you have a few spin-offs like Kong versus Godzilla, which is a thing that happened. And that one's interesting because depending on who you talk to, I've only seen one version and King Kong wins, but I've always heard that if you saw the version in Japan, Godzilla wins, which I always thought was funny. But that one's bad. The costumes are really bad. It definitely just looks like two dudes like wrestling in costumes. There's no sense of scale whatsoever.
So it's kind of like Power Rangers in that aspect.
Oh, yeah, it's an episode of Power Rangers that somehow got released theatrically, like way back in the 50s or 60s or whenever that came out.
Kept waiting for Anakin to call in his Zord.
Yeah.
That would have been awesome. I am not going to lie. That would have been really cool if Anakin, like, grabbed a ship and he was like, hey, if we do this and that, like, we can just, like, stick these ships together, and then he's fighting the Zillo Beast. It would have been great.
What would Anakin's Zord be, though? If he actually had a designed, animalistic Zord, would it just be a giant whiny baby, or, like, what would it be?
It would be
I just imagine it'd be like a Voltron sort of thing, just like a bigger Robo dude, basically, right?
Like, yeah. Well,
or like Gundam, right?
My first thought was like a giant Watto, because Ryan, we speculated that Watto is actually Anakin's father, and that's why Shmi was like, yeah, no, there's no father.
There was no father. Yes, magic of the Force. Born
and then
of
my
the Force,
second
yes.
thought was, what is as far away from sand as you can get? But living.
It's a good question. I guess water, like a tsunami. I don't know.
Nope, I got it. It would be a giant C-3PO because he's already built one. He knows how to do it. So a big golden Tony.
There you go.
Fighting a Zillo Beast.
And so if that's the case, I want to imagine that Anakin is like the Green Ranger, where instead of piloting the C-3PO, he's just standing on top of him with a little flute and just like playing him along.
Oh no!
I think he's playing like his robotic arm, like the Power Glove.
Do you think any Jedi ever had a lightsaber that was also like a flute that he could like blow in like a whistle, like a safety saber? Like, I'm lost and
Mate?
Lost. Come find me.
I think if anybody did, it would probably be Obi-Wan Kenobi. He seems like
maybe that's how he created the dragon noises in New Hope.
Oh, that's
the ones that sound like sand people yelling.
Yeah, well, I was always a little confused. I was always a little confused by people claiming that was dragon noises. I kind of just started doing that because of Star Wars Minute, but I honestly never caught on that they were supposed to be dragon noises. Yeah, I agree with you there.
Lorenzo and I have talked about it before, and I grew up watching the Pan and Scan, which I still have and still occasionally watch in my garage. But that scene where Luke is looking through the viewfinder and he's like, oh, there's sand people. I can see one of them now. Like, you can't see that in the Pan and Scan. All you can see is
the banthas.
Yeah, all you can see is a bantha. And for my entire life until I was an adult and spent money and was able to buy these movies on DVD and watch them, I was like, holy shit, there's actually sand people in this thing.
Yeah, I remember that 2004 DVD release like changing my entire life because I could see those edges finally. I
believe you prefer the term Tusken Raider.
Gorfas, right? Isn't that what the native Tatooiners are called?
Is that what it is? I have never heard that term.
I believe they're actually Gorfas, native Tatooiners. Because Ryan,
you gotta stop saying Tatooiners.
Do we also know that they're native? Is that established?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Gotcha. That was a real gotcha question.
You gotta dig in the archives. Dig in the archives. They're never incomplete.
I'm sorry, there are no records of this planet existing in the Jedi archives.
That's impossible.
It must have been erased. Wait, it must not exist. That's
the records can't be.
Never existed.
The records can't be wrong.
Yeah.
We just saw Jocasta Nu a couple weeks ago.
How's
We
she doing?
don't
She
see
did absolutely
Jocasta Nu.
nothing.
What's
Yeah.
up?
How's she doing?
She was not doing well. She got knocked out by a changeling that was posing as another Jedi, and then her physical form was taken over by said changeling, and then she fought Ahsoka in a pretty dynamic lightsaber duel, and then she got arrested. But really, all the while, she was just kind of passed out on the floor, I think.
Yeah, she didn't do shit. So.
But she is not in this episode. But the Zillo Beast is, and so is Ahsoka and Anakin, and they've had their spat, and I think it's somewhere around this point that they figure out that the Beast is coming for them, or at least coming their direction, right?
Yeah, the klaxons of the city start blaring, so talking about
Oh, that's
warning
right.
sabers. Yeah, so they're in that office. They turn around. They start seeing explosions from a distance. I was alluding to this before. The Zillo Beast is like knocking off bridges, and people are dying, and people are plummeting to their death from the higher levels. And I like this little moment where Palpatine, apparently on the emergency broadcast system,
Has like a pre-recorded message because he's not doing this live.
Right, yeah. So I thought that was weird because there's only one screen with him on there, but then there's like a audio playing of him saying like, "Hey, there's an emergency. Don't freak out."
I definitely felt this was like Big Brother-ish and things of that sort, but like the klaxons blaring and like this warning system throughout the entire city, which would feasibly, I guess it wouldn't be planet-wide, it would just be regional to where the damage is happening, right?
The entire planet is one big city.
Holy
Yeah.
shit. Is that how this works?
I mean, according
Yeah, I think
to,
the whole city's on lockdown, right? Like,
according to that Nububian pilot from Phantom
C.O.
Menace.
Bibble? No, not C.O.
No, it
Bibble.
wasn't C.O. Bibble. It was Captain Tanaka.
Rick Ollier.
Rick Ollier. You're right. Yes, sorry.
There we go.
No, C.O.
that is a
Bibble,
deep cut.
if Chancellor Palpatine's communications had been cut off from issuing his planet-wide broadcast, that could only mean one thing, according to C.O. Bibble.
Invasion.
Correct.
Yeah.
I like the setup on that one. I teed that one good, man. Hole in one.
Appreciate it.
So no, I'm just curious about the so Palpatine becomes Chancellor, and then like his first round of duties aren't actually like checking the welfare of the city planet. It's like, hey, by the way, you have to record like a whole new set of emergency broadcast system warnings. We're gonna have to sit you down for 3 hours as we record every single possibility that could happen, right? It's like becoming president and then having to
because
record
it's
your
oddly
speech for-
specific, right?
Yeah, like it's like becoming president and then having to record a speech for Hall of Presidents, right? Like there's
Yeah.
not other stuff you have to do. You need to record this so that we can get the Walt Disney ride going for you. Like,
Well, it's sort of like when you're getting ready to not be president anymore, you have to plan your own funeral.
yeah,
Because while you're still president, I guess that's all handled. But once you're getting ready to be ex-president, you have to like make all those decisions. So one of the last things you do when you're president is plan your own funeral.
it's like funeral and like museum and all that stuff kind of get all lumped
Library.
together, right?
Yeah.
Library, yeah.
Usually presidents have their funeral at whatever presidential library they set up. But it is weird that like that's part of the, hey, so you're done with the last job you'll ever have. Now let's talk about what happens when you die.
Yeah. Could be tomorrow, could be 30, 40 years from now.
But I'm sure
that's just-
Palpatine, well actually, yeah, but Palpatine would just say, well, I don't plan on dying. There are some who have found a way to defeat death.
Yeah. Do you think they planned out like all the parade routes or the processional routes for?
I mean, Coruscant, if the planet
Yeah,
is truly one big city, I imagine the parade just never stops.
So it just keeps. It's like one giant.
I think so.
Do you think
By-
he's having like a New Orleans jazz style funeral happening? Like,
Yeah, I think new people just sub in and out as it goes around the planet, and by the time it makes a full rotation, it's probably an entirely new crew. But yeah, I think it's probably just a funeral parade, or funeral parade style, but you know, military parade, just the whole planet round, constantly swapping out new people as needed.
Is this like a never-ending conga line that eventually just like clutters the air with unneeded traffic, like in an ever lengthening game of global snake or something like this?
Yeah, like an Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. The parade eventually meets itself.
Yes.
And then there's
politics.
nobody.
Am I right?
Oh man.
So then also with this processional that's happening, can you imagine the traffic shutdowns that would just be wreaking havoc on Coruscant? Like people trying to go work and...
Well,
like
luckily,
cars fly.
unlike where you're from, Lorenzo, or not where you're from, but where you are currently, traffic can move in 3 dimensions, so it doesn't have to just get wider and slow down.
I don't believe you.
But it can go, vertical. That's the word I'm looking for. Up and down.
It's a Southern California emergency every time the president visits and shuts down a freeway here. So
well, we like it in DC here when he leaves. So
Thanks
for taking the hit for a day when we get him the rest of the year.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And this is why Obi-Wan hates flying.
Yeah, because it's
as he says,
all amuck. Yeah.
Very, very, very true.
So where were we past the funeral processions?
I think we're still in Palpatine's office, man.
No, they escaped the office. He said his security. He had the security protocol on the the ship.
That's right, and he says something. He says my security team insisted on this escape route, which is them like walking down a hallway to a landing bay and getting in a ship to fly somewhere else.
With the security personnel on board.
Yeah.
I thought this was going to be some cool ass Batman thing where they like sit in his chair and like lean back and like fire down through a tunnel or some shit.
It's just a hallway. It's just another hallway.
It's just a landing pad and a hangar. And also like is Palpatine's security personnel like able to because there are certain instances where if something happens, the Secret Service takes over and the president, is not in control of what's happening immediately. Like things are just happening to him. He's getting shoved in vehicles and driven away from whatever scenario is happening. But like, if Palpatine really didn't think that a given security measure was necessary, couldn't he just say that security measure isn't necessary and mind trick them? Like, how are his security personnel insisting that he do anything?
I think he lets them play the game. I mean, it's probably something that he wanted anyway. It could be that he put the idea in their head that they need to insist that this thing happens so that
escape plan.
He has the escape route, when he needs it as Sheevil, as opposed to just good Sheev.
That was the thing I thought about. So they get in the ship and they take off and they're flying away, and then the Zillo Beast grabs them, and
immediately. And then Anakin has like an escape plan, which everybody else seems to clock immediately, but I'm like, I don't really know what he's doing. And all it is cutting the front of the ship off, and then that falls, and then they're supposed to get rescued, which Obi-Wan seems to get. And I haven't watched the show before this, so maybe that was obvious to you guys. But then the Zillo Beast almost crushes Palpatine, and this is where anything that's a prequel, I really enjoyed these 2 episodes. But this is where, like, the whole idea that it's a prequel, where wouldn't it have been better for the entire universe if Palpatine had been crushed in that moment? Like, isn't it worse that he escapes and Anakin helps save him?
Well, it wouldn't have been better for Kylo Ren.
How do you figure?
Yeah.
Because I think that if the Emperor's gone, then there's no Vader, and then Kylo Ren doesn't have anything to live up to, and there's no First Order, and Kylo Ren is just like a...
Do we want a First Order? Well, do we want a First Order?
I'm saying for him specifically in the future.
So Ryan's basically bringing up like a would you kill baby Hitler scenario, essentially, right?
If Hitler was an old Naboobian man who was already clearly evil. Like, there's Emperor or Chancellor Palpatine is not a babe in swaddling clothes at this point. He's an old man who has seized power and is clearly doing not good things. And a giant monster that he's been torturing almost kills him. And all I'm saying is, wouldn't it have been a little better if the monster had actually just killed him in that moment and we'd be done with it?
Yeah, universe-wide, I think the Republic would get to carry on. There'd be no execute Order 66. Right.
Yeah.
Would Maz Kanata take over? Is that
I can halfway agree with you.
Oh,
universe wide would have been good. For These Aren't the Nerds You're Looking For would have been bad because this would be our last episode. But you would have been on for the finale.
I mean, the Clone Wars would still continue without Palpatine, though, right?
I don't know, man.
What are the implications?
Sci-fi thing I've seen, when you take out the mothership, all of the underlings just kind of fall over and it's over. So I assume the clones would have all just crumpled into a pile. Yeah, so, that's true.
I guess we'll have to see what happens in we're 40 so another 85 episodes. We'll see.
All right. Well, I didn't mean to suggest that your show shouldn't exist. That was folly on my part. But I was
leave it to Kevin to just extrapolate the worst out of everything.
Just thinking big picture.
I'm just trying to stick up for the Zillo Beast here.
Sounds like you're sticking up for Palpatine.
Here, let me rewind and put it this way: the Zillo Beast knows what it's like to have somebody want to destroy you for the only reason that they want to destroy you is because you exist. And so he wants to put the pressure on Palpatine and make Palpatine feel like the Zillo Beast is going to kill him. But then in the end, the Zillo Beast is like, hey, you see what that feels like? But I'm not that type of guy. I'm not going to do that because I have a heart.
And then they kill it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it backfires on him.
It's weird to me that, so they fire all these missiles that have the fuel that's been turned into the gas that will kill the Zillo Beast. And Anakin and Obi-Wan and the crew, Yoda, are all running from the gas cloud. But then they're like, they seem to all simultaneously realize they can't outrun it. And then they use their force powers to prevent the gas from touching them, which seems to suggest that this gas isn't specific to Zillo Beast. It's just a cloud of toxic gas.
Right, which means it's just going to kind of dissipate and kill everybody around them because they had to protect themselves from it.
Into a city, what was the logic there?
See, but they got it in its mouth. Okay, it was a direct hit to the mouth.
Which, yeah.
But no, I noticed that too, which I thought was funny because also they're at the Senate. They're right in the middle of it. It's not just that they're downtown. They're dead center. In the heart of Midtown, right?
I think there was a lot of collateral damage that went on today.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I will mark this as, for me, the saddest moment so far that we've seen in the Clone Wars is when they murder the Zillo Beast, and because it stretches for 2 or 3 minutes, it goes on.
And it comes in waves too.
It does.
It comes in waves because they're zapping it from the lats, they're shooting lasers at it. Yoda and Aayla Secura are running up and down its back, fucking messing with it.
Yoda almost gets his
lit for no reason because they know that those will not work.
Yeah,
I think it's just to aggravate it to,
distract. Look at the bright light.
It's like gnats or flies flying around you. They're not going to do anything to you but bug you and distract you from what you're actually doing, which is trying to kill the president of the universe.
So is the Zillo Beast the real hero of the episode?
We are going to get to that, Ryan. That is a very good question.
All right, didn't mean to jump the gun.
Nope, you're good. So, to kind of wrap up what happens here in this episode is everybody gets out on the goody-goody except for the Zillo Beast, who is destroyed to death by just waves and waves of assault until the poor innocent thing can't take it anymore. And everybody comes out alive. At one point in time, Sheev rides R2 to safety, which is akin to Han Solo getting his last name from some random Imperial officer, which is ridiculous. That's my thoughts on that. So at the end of the episode, we recoalesce with all the main characters, and I feel like there was like a shit ton that were all lined up. It was Mace, Yoda, Obi, Padme, Anakin, Rex, Ayla Secura, 3PO, R2, and they kind of all give each other a nod of like, hey, that was a thing that happened, and then kind of split up. Sheev walks off, talks to the doctor, and then the rest walk off in another direction, whatever. But as Sheev is talking to Dr. Bull, does he like give her a message or something? It's not verbal, right?
No, he gives her an... Oh, yeah. She's like holding a thing, some sort of pad or paper or something.
Uh-huh.
He hands
like,
her new orders. He said, "Here are your new orders," and he hands her like a giant.
It
looks like if an iPad was invented in 1987. But the iPad was supposed to be one piece of paper's worth of data. Like that's what he hands her.
Yeah.
And then it has the case around it that you put on a 1987 iPad for your kids, so they don't. The first time they drop it, it doesn't break. It lasts at least like...
It looked like the Game Gear, almost.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah.
And so Doc says, you want me to clone the beast? And she just, like, boards this lat and takes off and smirks and cue loud music and iris out. And that's the end of this.
Yeah.
Can I just say it's weird that George Lucas still gets to have his name first at the end of these episodes?
Well, I mean, you got to think at this point it was, 2008? I mean, this is before the sale. So, if his name is first when it comes to Resistance, then I would agree with you. But this is deep into the expanded universe of George Lucas himself. So, George actually came in on some episodes and said... okay, guys, we're gonna do this here, and we're gonna do this, and it was George that basically walked in. He had seen an array of episodes and said, "We're gonna put these 4 together, and we're gonna release this as a movie," because it was never intended to be a movie. And at that point, everybody needed to click heels and
Make it
snap
happen.
fingers and do whatever and get the shit done. So. That's
Fair
why.
enough. I legitimately did not know that, and I appreciate you telling me. And I, cool, good to know.
So, that's why. Ryan, what we do next is we just judge these on a binary basis of thumbs up, thumbs down, and give our opinion, supporting facts, whatever you want. And then we're going to talk about one other thing that you brought up earlier, and about whether or not the Zillo Beast is the hero of this episode. So, So I'll go ahead and go first. I give this one a solid thumbs up. I really enjoyed this. It's a good extension of the Zillo Beast, and I got good thoughts on it overall. There's nitpicky shit that you can say whatever about, but as a 2-part story arc, we've seen a few of them throughout this series so far, and I feel like this is solid. It does have a purpose. We got a thing that's set up, and then we have a conclusion to the thing. It affects there are effects to like the greater story as a whole, and people react accordingly, whether or not they react
appropriately is in question,
but there is, there's something that goes on outside of this little thing, and I think it's a good 2-part thing. So, thumbs up for me.
Yeah.
Lorenzo? Ryan? Either one?
I'll start. Yeah, I agree. I actually really like this episode. And we talked about it in the last episode. I'm a massive Godzilla fan, and this episode does a good job. These 2 episodes do a good job of kind of stringing together one arc, but each episode is their own standalone episode. And in terms of just having a monster wreak havoc, it does a good job telling the story. Like you said, there's not really any wasted scenes here. A lot of the other episodes that I have problems with, they kind of just throw stuff in without any rhyme or reason. But this one's pretty straightforward. It's nice. It's a well done episode. So yeah, easy as that. So Ryan,
100% thumbs up. I have not watched any Clone Wars before you guys got in touch with me and asked me to be on the show. It has nothing to do with me not loving Star Wars and everything to do with my own nerd peculiarities, but coming in completely blind to all previous Clone Wars stuff, these were 2 fantastic episodes. I legitimately enjoyed every moment of them, and like anything I said that seemed critical of them were absolutely just nitpicks, and I had a blast watching this.
That's awesome. So, you mentioned at the beginning of our recording that you would kind of explain why you had not partaken in viewing of the Clone Wars. Do you want to elaborate on that beyond anything that you just said, or?
Yeah, I mean, the Clone Wars are interesting because they're one of the... Before Disney came in, it was kind of the first time that Star Wars had been retconned. Because you had the original Clone Wars cartoon that was done by Genndy Tartakovsky. And then and that was like traditionally animated, and then you had the CGI version. And I wasn't paying very close attention to when all that was happening, so I knew that there was a traditionally animated one, I knew there was a computer animated one, I didn't know what the difference was, I didn't know where to start, but my wife and I are huge Samurai Jack fans. And so we eventually decided we were going to start with the Genndy Tartakovsky ones, but then those were
good.
I've heard, but they've been taken off of all the streaming services because they're no longer quote-unquote canon. And so we've basically just stalled out because I want to see those first before I dive into the CGI ones that are the now supposedly canonical, or maybe not even canonical ones now that Disney's taken over. So it just, because of the weirdness surrounding the differences in the 2 productions and their availability, and really just loving Genndy Tartakovsky's storytelling style and animation style, I just have been unwilling to commit myself to watch CGI ones because I want to get his vision of the Clone Wars first.
Ryan, I am willing to ship my DVD copies of both of those across the country so that you and your wife can watch them, so long as you promise that eventually sometime I will get them back.
Okay, I might very well take you up on that. We will see. I might have to figure out how to plug in my DVD player. It's been a long time since I've used physical media, but I do have a DVD player. I need to learn how to use it. So that is certainly an option.
Go. So yeah, if that's the invitation's out there.
Appreciate
I will loan them to you. I will be the precursor to Redbox download. No, what's the other one?
I like it.
What's the other one? Yeah, Netflix, where you used to have to get the DVDs, but it'll be
school Netflix.
The old school, yeah.
Yeah, what's funny? Yeah, that's funny. There was a movie that I was recommending to my parents for a while that wasn't available streaming. It was only available on the DVDs, and they weren't getting around to it, and so I eventually just logged into their Netflix account, and because they still have the DVD plan, and had the DVD sent to their house.
That's hilarious.
Very nice.
Perfectly, because they were able to watch it, and they were like, "That was a really good movie." And I was like, "You're not at all bothered that I just like am big brothering your movie selection?" And they're like, "No, it was good." Like, all right, fine.
That's funny.
Hey, somebody's got to keep up on that. So.
Right?
We got a 3-way thumbs up here, which is
that normal?
What's that?
Say again?
Is that normal? Do you guys normally like the episode, or did I just get lucky with a really good episode?
So as far as our guests go, you have broken even. So we are 50-50, thumbs up, thumbs down for guests of the show. Lorenzo is typically a little more negative so far. I've been arguing that he's going to turn his opinion around. He's 13 up, 21 down, which gives his scores like a 38.24%.
Oh, wow.
I'm 24 up, 10 down for like 70.59%. So...
Well, you guys are a good compliment to each other then, because that's almost 100%.
Yeah, we're one episode off. No, we're actually 3 episodes off by now. It used to be almost opposite.
Yeah, we used to disagree every episode.
All the time. And it was only recently that Lorenzo gave an episode a thumbs up and I gave it a thumbs down, which we were 32 episodes into the show by the time that happened.
Your cycles are nearly in sync.
I guess so.
Yeah.
So yeah, one other thing that I like to do, I've got this big ass spreadsheet, Ryan, that has I
love a spreadsheet.
Shows and all kinds of stuff, and it's many columns and several hundred rows and all kinds of stuff. But aside from attributing the quote at the beginning of the fortune cookie, which we did not do a great job of this episode, I also like to define who the villain is, or the capital B bad guy. And I was conflicted here because the last episode I put down as the Zillo Beast. So the Zillo Beast was the antagonist, capital B bad guy of the Zillo Beast. For the Zillo Beast Strikes Back, I am unsure. And when you said, does this make the Zillo Beast the hero of this episode? I agreed with you. So I don't know. Right now I have Zillo Beast / Palpatine for the bad guy. And I don't know how to fill all of the cells of my spreadsheet and make myself happy and also be accurate to this particular episode of the show.
Well, I mean, do you consider, when we talk about monster movies, is King Kong the villain of King Kong? Or is, it was Beauty that killed the beast. It's not King Kong. Nothing that happens in the King Kong movie is King Kong's fault. Nothing that happens in Godzilla is Godzilla's fault. They are an animal reacting to the thing. It's man is the villain. Man,
right.
Big capital M, man. And the Zillo Beast is the Star Wars version of that. The shark in Jaws is not the villain. If anything, it's the mayor of Amity who keeps the beach open when he knows there's a shark. So I'm going to argue hard that Palpatine is the villain, and if I had to come in with a second tier villain, my sub villain, it's the two droids, the droid that lifts up the scale and clearly causes a lot of pain, and then the droid that comes in with the needle and takes the blood sample. Those two are my secondary villains, but I think it's Palpatine.
Okay, I'm totally okay with going Palpatine on this, which is that would be a first that we have a quote unquote good guy that ends up the capital B bad guy of the episode. But I think it's valid.
Yeah,
that's
I agree completely. Palpatine for sure. And your comparisons to King Kong, Godzilla are completely correct. That's how those movies operate.
You can even go to a much more sinister film, something like Alien or Aliens, where in the way the movie is framed, the people are the protagonists, so you're supposed to root for them. But realistically, the xenomorphs don't do anything wrong. Mm-hmm. They're just trying to survive, and they just happen to be parasites, and we as humans have a very negative reaction to anything parasitic. But the xenomorphs are just surviving.
I totally agree with you, and I was going to probably go one step further and go to Phantom of the Opera, and the Phantom is set up as the antagonist, but the bad guy in all this thing is Raoul, because Raoul goes he's butting heads with the Phantom because he thinks the Phantom is stealing his girl and all this shit, and they get in a fight and stab each other and blah 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 blah. But the Phantom is an unfortunate comes from an unfortunate circumstance. Go ahead.
I'm going to disagree with you because the Phantom does end up killing somebody. He hangs the dude from the rafters.
The fucking Zillo Beast killed a whole bunch of somebodies.
Yeah, Lorenzo. But again, provoked, whereas the Phantom is just trying to interrupt a opera that's happening. And then
Kevin, let's imagine you were taking a nap, and on the time scale of an ant, your nap probably seems as if it lasts for centuries. And so you're taking a nap, and then all these ants start stinging you, and you're like, what's happening? Oh, this is terrible. And you just start smacking at ants because you're like, no, get away from me. Why are you stinging me? This is terrible. And then the ants overpower you and knock you unconscious, and then you wake up and you're underground in the ant mound, and they're like taking blood samples and being like, yeah, we're gonna figure out what makes this thing tick, and we're gonna use it to make armor because the other ant colony, they suck, and we're gonna kill them. We're gonna use the powers from this giant thing we found. And so you wake up and you're like, no, screw you, ants, I'm gonna kill all y'all. Like, even if it's accidentally as I flail about to escape your mound, like, you're not the bad guy at any point in that story. It's just these ants were dicks.
I am in total agreement with you, and I think in this analogy, my name is Gulliver, and I look like Jack Black.
Right, with the Lilliputians.
I believe so.
The Jack Black version? That's the one?
That's the Jonathan Swift literary classic.
Right.
We're looking, visual media here.
You gotta really
as I say on
there, Kevin.
As I say on a podcast, right?
Right.
So I think framed. I think a lot of storytelling is about framing. Star Wars, if anything, does an excellent job framing because Star Wars is one of the first major, properties I can think of that spent 3 movies showing how a hero becomes the main villain of a different set of 3 movies. So if anything, taking a character that seems villainous and showing how they actually are the heroes is in keeping with the way that Star Wars storytelling tends to play out.
Well said.
Definitely. But yeah, sorry, Kevin. The fandom is the bad guy.
But also, Kevin, you're wrong. just make sure we're clear on that.
Just throwing that in there.
I don't know, man.
But it's also because Kevin and I have this thing where he really enjoys the Phantom of the Opera and the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, which is fine. I do enjoy the music, but that movie left such a bad taste in my mouth. So.
But what about the R.L. Stine Goosebumps classic, Phantom of the Auditorium?
That one I have not seen.
That I have no memories of that, honestly.
I feel like
you get to be about the dummy.
Then
we can talk, but
you feel like I just what, Kevin?
I said I feel like you just looked that up. Like
no, you said Phantom of the Opera, and the only image I had in my head was the cover of a Goosebumps book. So I did search Goosebumps Phantom, and Phantom of the Auditorium came up, and I've definitely read it. But that's the only point of reference I have for Phantom of the Opera is the R.L. Stine, I'll say classic, Phantom of the Auditorium.
Yeah,
sure.
I think all R.L. Stine books are.
Again,
a modern horror master if you're 13 or younger.
And yes, another Jack Black reference. So.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's actually an excellent point. Is Jack Black secretly R.L. Stine? Has anyone seen Jack Black and R.L. Stine in the same place at the same time?
See, that's a good point. I don't think we have. So
keep an eye out, listeners.
Right.
People haven't even seen Jack Black and R.L. Stine in the R.L. Stine sequel, right? At the same time, because he wasn't in it.
Which did that come out at all? We're getting so far off Goosebumps because Jack Black was in that other weird movie, The House with the Clock in Its Walls, which is the worst title to have to fucking say 10 times.
It's kind of like These Aren't the Nerds You're Looking For.
Oh yeah, these aren't the nerds you're looking for is also a very nice, succinct title. But yeah, The House with the Clock in Its Walls, starring Jack Black and Cate Blanchett.
Not a bad cast.
To get to pull us back into the Zillo Beast and the Clone Wars and Lorenzo and Ryan. Back, Kevin. One more time, Ryan.
Tractor beam us back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ryan, do you want to talk about anything else Star Wars? Do you want to give your opinion of the OT, PT, ST, or other Star Wars movies? It's up to you.
It's interesting to me that thanks to a show like The Clone Wars, which I have meant to watch, but haven't just because of the weirdness I mentioned earlier, watching these episodes made me very excited to go back and actually revisit it. But it's interesting to me that Anakin is, while he is often morally conflicted because of the influence that Palpatine has over him, is still mostly the hero of a lot of these stories. And it's interesting to me that because the show ran for several seasons, in terms of just time on screen, younger viewers, if they were to watch everything from Star Wars in order, would spend more time with Anakin as the hero of the story than they would Luke. And that to me is just a fascinating quirk of the way that stories are told today, because I'm a huge Luke Skywalker fan. I would put him in my pantheon of great literary heroes of all time. And so it's just odd to me that the villain that Luke is famous for defeating actually spends more time being a hero on screen, quote unquote, than Luke does.
I can tell you that just the Clone Wars TV series logs in around 48 and a half hours.
Yeah. So to me, that's just cool. It's an interesting quirk of modern storytelling that warrants conversation. So I'm glad shows like yours exist, where we can talk about these things in depth and really dig into what's happening in the universe in these in-between moments that we don't see in the films. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on Solo or anything that's come out recently that you wanted to add to the conversation?
Solo was fine. I think Disney, it seems to me that the Star Wars corner of Disney is going through some of the same growing pains that the Marvel side went through. I still lament that we never got the Edgar Wright Ant-Man movie, and then the fact that like the Taika Waititi Thor Ragnarok movie was so popular, to me was just like, yeah, so maybe you shouldn't have told Edgar Wright he couldn't do what he wanted to do, you fat dinks. Like, what were you thinking? And so I can't figure out why Taika Waititi can do his Thor film to both critical and popular acclaim, but Lord and Miller can't do their Solo movie without getting interrupted. And, you know, Rian Johnson's vision is so heavily debated. So to me, it's just weird that, like, you would think that the lessons learned in the 18, 19 films of the Marvel Universe would translate to Star Wars reasonably well, but so far they haven't seemed to really figure out how to make the non-episodic movies click. And I remain I remain cautiously optimistic. I want them to work. I'm forever hoping for more good Star Wars content. You know, to me, I'm the kind of person where Star Wars is pizza. It's never bad. It's just maybe not what you were hoping. So yeah, I want to like things. That's kind of where I'm coming at with Star Wars.
No, that's a good thing, because a good way to approach it, and I appreciate hearing that from you, because I always hear this idea with Solo, you know, bombing, like, it still made money, just not as much as, say, any other Star Wars, but I always thought it was really funny that people were trying to throw, like, Star Wars fatigue around, you know?
I think that we looked this up recently, and it only made $120 million less than Episode 3, which was supposed to be the last fucking Star Wars story ever.
But also, your profit margins are going to be bigger if you don't film every movie twice, because you fire directors mostly.
Exactly.
Ron Howard said that he reshot, 70-ish% of the movie, so, like, movies are cheaper if you only do them once.
Yep.
I'm not an economist, but I can do that math for you.
Yeah, but even just taking profit margins out of it, just the idea of just actual box office numbers and people trying to read into reasons for it. The fact that we've had 3 Marvel movies this year and they've all done decently well, you know? And Kevin's heard me say this plenty of times, but, like, the newest Ant-Man comes out, doesn't break $100 million opening weekend, and nobody calls for the resignation of Kevin Feige.
Yeah.
Is really bizarre to me.
I mean, is it bizarre? Is there anything we can figure out that might be different about Kathleen Kennedy versus Kevin Feige and where nerds tend to find their problems with it? Huh.
What could that possibly be?
Could it be the difference between a Y chromosome, maybe?
I don't.
Oh, you're talking chromosomes. I thought you were talking about a penis.
Turns out the two are highly correlated, Kevin. Not 100% correlated, but highly correlated. So, yeah, there's obviously some issues there. And for what it's worth, like, I love Rey. I think she's a fantastic addition to the canon, and I love Finn as well. And I thought Rose was a really interesting attempt at something, and I don't know. for whatever you thought of how that character functioned in Last Jedi, I don't know why you would harass the actual person that portrayed them.
Yes.
that to me is just such a foreign concept for getting what you want in this world. In this world being the world of Star Wars, or the world that is our Earth that we actually have to deal with each other on. So, I mean, it's crazy. Let me think how to say this. I love the original Star Wars. I love that it is a diverse cast of different kinds of people, including, badass women like Leia. And there's that clip that goes around every once in a while where Mark Hamill is talking about when he was out giving a lecture, just giving a talk or something like that. And there was a young boy who had an injury or some disease where he needed to have his arm amputated. And the little boy told Mark Hamill, or his mom told Mark Hamill, or whoever was talking to him, telling him the story, said, "I wasn't scared because I knew Luke lost his hand and it was fine." And so to me, like, Star Wars is always about how do we make the little guy, how do we make the underdog feel powerful and feel like they can still be the hero of the story. And I love the way Mark Hamill tells that story, because he's got, Hamill clearly has such a big heart. And it is so consistent with the philosophy of the Jedi to me, to the point where, I am no longer a person with religion, but I might as well believe in the Force for what I feel philosophically about what it says of how we should treat each other. And I actually think that it is a truly powerful message for our own world as much as it is a powerful message in the Star Wars.
Well said.
Definitely, yeah.
To add to that, Mark Hamill is a great conversationalist and an excellent storyteller in his own right. And I have seen him live a few times, either on panels or solo. Not to make a pun there, right? But he's excellent every time.
I mean, Mark Hamill to me is clearly one of us who got to be in a Star Wars movie.
Definitely.
And
yes.
I love him. I love that A, hasn't gone to his head, because he's still clearly as into it as we would be if we were in his position. I don't know. He seems like in every way a delight.
No arguments there. So, Ryan, do you want to let everybody know where they can find you and or your podcast and or whatever you're doing scientifically online?
Yeah, man.
Or in the real world, or whatever, however you want to promote yourself.
My name is Ryan. Hi. I have a website. It's ryanhaupt.com. And I really appreciated getting to talk to Kevin and Lorenzo for these past 2 hours. And my website basically just has some basic biographical info about me, and then a page about my research, and a page of sort of some of the stuff I've done on the internet. And the research page, if you're interested in what fossil sloths or fossil mountain lions or things like that are doing, were doing, I guess, would be the appropriate conjugation of the verb. Go check that out. Otherwise, I do a podcast. It's called Science Sort Of. ScienceSort.com is where you can find that. We're also on iTunes and all the same places that you've subscribed to These Are Not the Nerds You're Looking For podcast. And we talk about, as was hinted at the beginning of the episode, just anything that comes up in science that sparks our interest. We've been doing it since 2009. And someday we'll get better at it, but fingers crossed. And
you did a long time ago.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And then I try to be a scientist who exists in public in a way that is hopefully welcoming to people. I want to be. A lot of times when I introduce myself to folks, I tell them, "Oh, hi, my name is Ryan. I'm a paleontologist." And one of the most common responses I get is, "Oh my gosh, you're the first paleontologist I've ever met." And that is exciting to me, because most people expect me to be Ross, and I just try to be who I am, and hopefully that all works out. And I want to be your friendly neighborhood scientist. And so if you want to follow me on Twitter or find my podcast and write in there, I'm happy to talk to you about whatever it is in science that piques your interest. So yeah, that's my plug.
Very nice. Well done.
Awesome.
So
Lorenzo,
because the Earth is flat, how deep can you go?
Because of the what?
Because the Earth is flat, how deep can you go? Oh.
Not far. You just fall off the other side, and suddenly you're sliding down the turtle's back.
You see, if the Earth was round, you could go halfway deep, because once you get halfway, then you wouldn't be going in anymore. But since it's flat, you can go all the way. So there's the answer to that one.
Mind blown. We have not actually covered... Go ahead.
If you do go all the way through the flat Earth, it'll drain and you'll run out of water. So even if you can, but you'd be sad that you did.
Pretty sure that was the end of Lost.
Right, they pulled the cork.
Pulled the cork out of the island.
God.
We actually haven't covered Flat Earth on the show yet. We've talked about it. We've discussed it in our back channels, and the reason we haven't covered it yet is because it's too stupid to be worth our time.
Right.
Surely.
We haven't figured out a way to cover it where there's any science to impart other than no, the Earth's not flat. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Bye.
Right. It'd be a short episode. Like, come on, people, use your fucking brain, and if you can't do that, use YouTube, and then you'll either succeed or fail at life.
Well, if there's a future Clone Wars episode that features a disc, or record-shaped planet, I hope you'll have me back on to discuss how that could have potentially happened in the evolution of any given solar system.
There is actually one episode way further down the line that I would like to bring you back for, and we can talk on mic or off mic about that either way. So
I'm into it. I've had a great time chatting with you guys. This has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Okay. Good to hear.
Why don't we, Lorenzo, why don't we wrap this stuff up and let our listeners out of here, and Ryan, if you want to stick around after that and chat for a little bit, you are definitely more than welcome. But at the same time, I don't want to take up more of your time than you budgeted for. So I really appreciate you coming on. I am a sincere fan of Science Sort Of, and I heard of you through Star Wars Minute. You hosted on Star Wars Minute.
They do it? They get it right?
I think so. I think we're in sync. But you hosted on them, whatever your first appearance was with them way back in the day.
I did the Destruction of Alderaan. That's how far back I go.
Okay.
Oh, damn.
So that would be I think by the time I found the show, they had already started the Phantom Menace. So then I went back to the beginning, heard what podcast you were doing, went and listened to Science Sort Of, been listening to it since then. So you guys do some awesome stuff, and
I appreciate that.
Congratulations
I've tried to get Alex on. It just hasn't quite worked out yet, but someday.
He seems more available than PTR.
Well, yeah, but different time zones, different availabilities. It's
Yep.
It is what it is. Alex is kind of a low-key astronomy nerd, which so I've kind of wanted to we've had comic book professionals on the show before, just because I am also a comic book nerd in addition to being a working scientist, and so I've kind of talked with Alex a little bit of just you want to come on and talk about being a cartoonist who's into science, and just someday we'll make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty.
All right.
Thanks again for having me, fellas. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Just
thanks,
going to do a quick wrap up on our end. If you want to contact Kevin at all, he's on Twitter at NotTheNerds. If you want to email us at NotTheNerdsPodcast@gmail.com, Facebook at NotTheNerds, all that good stuff. But yeah, that's been our episode. So
we'll see you next week for Season 2, Episode 4, Senate Spy. Until then, these aren't the nerds you're looking for.
Not the nerds you're looking for.
Cue loud music.